but you can't knock the horse. He does try extremely hard. Obviously, he came up against a stablemate in the juvenile 2 years ago. But he's like at the start of the season when we started schooling him, we just thought he might just lack a bit of size and scope, over the bigger fences. But at the end of the day, he's won a Grade 1 at Sandown the last day. He's entitled to be head of the betting for the JLT. I think he'll run a massive race. And like we were just saying, it's a funny race because York Hill, I don't know, many of you haven't seen it yet, but he schooled at Leopardstown today. And we just watched a video there at the break, and he was a bit erratic over the first couple, going a bit left, things like that. Obviously, I know Cheltenham's left-handed, so at least he's hanging the right way as such. But it's not a nice tendency to have, especially in a novice chase. Anything can happen. He could be just vulnerable, and after today, I wouldn't be surprised if he did drift a bit. Top Notch is in their second favourite. Disco, does he go for the JLT?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, he's a horse now really I'm a fan of. I really like the way he won at Leopardstown the last day, giving Sean Flanagan his first Grade 1 winner, which is a big thing. He's a nice horse. He's by Marteline, Noel Mead. I suppose Road to Riches has been a good yardstick for him now. I think he just needs a new one, and I think Disco could be it. It's a wide open race in my opinion though. There's plenty of horses there and that are on the sheet that won't actually run because they're engaged elsewhere, like Frodon. I think they're on about bypassing Cheltenham with him. Charbel, obviously
he's going to the 2 mile.
Yeah, goes 2 mile. Whisper probably goes 3 miles. Might Bite goes 3 miles. So when you've taken all them out of it, there's not many left, But I think Top Notch, he'll take a lot of beating, and at 7-2 he could be a decent price.
Bell's on it. I see he fell over, didn't he, in the...
Yeah, he schooled today as well.
In the schooling he tipped up in the schooling session, so
I suppose that's the chances you take when you school in public, and on TV, but it's not ideal, but no better trainer than Willie Mullins to get him right again.
Tom, again, if we're looking at horses that potentially would have sufficient question marks about them to be taken on at the front of the market, I presume York Hill might be quite high up on the list, actually, because he does tend to polarise opinion.
Yeah, I mean, he was very impressive at the festival last year. He then ran a slightly strange race and just got the job done at Aintree. We've just seen him schooling. I mean, it was pretty scary over the first 3 or 4 fences. I think you have to take him on. I mean, he's 13-8 now with us. I think he's short. He's 5-4 in places. He's 7-4 in places. I think you have to take the horse on. The problem is most of the horses below him in the betting have other engagements, or there's reasons why you would think that Top Notch might come up slightly short. Politolog has shortened with us in recent days, 5-1. It's a gorgeous looking horse, fantastic jumper of fences. I mean, you can see Politolog leading them along. But then he got beaten by Waiting Patiently last time. I think you have to take York Hill on. If I had to back anything, it would be Politolog, and clearly some of our punters are thinking along similar lines.
Okay, I must admit, I always think Politolog is, if you are going to back him and you like trading out with things, I'd always leave a short price lay with him. I do think he's a bridle horse. I have to admit, I think he goes from travelling to stopping quite quickly. He might win on the bridle, but so given that we haven't abolished this, what's going to win?
It's interesting you were saying about divided opinion. I've divided opinion on my mind. I keep changing my mind. At the moment, it'll probably change again tomorrow, I've decided that York Hill's a certainty. I don't think the others are good enough to give him a race. I think Ruby will bury him down the inside, try and get him settled. He was so good last year, and that was a serious performance. I know Yard was under a bit of a cloud, but that was a stellar performance. Top Notch is a lovely, honest horse, but I don't think he's a real Grade 1 horse. I know he's won the Scilly Isles, but a Grade 1 horse at this level. Politolog, I think, is more looking at him for next year, I get the vibe. Disco's a horse I like, but as I mentioned in the context of the RSA, he's dropping back down in trip again here. To try and use those forcing tactics against a horse of this pace, I think he's going to struggle. And I'm crossing down the list, there are very few others with a realistic chance. The thing about York Hill, as the guys have said, is he does divide opinion. He is going to become a price because some bookmakers are going to want to take him on. For those of you who've read last year's guide, Tony Keenan did a piece about the Mullins runners that go off 3-1 or shorter, and how so many of them seem to go off too short on form, and how many of them win, and how much of a profit you make. And I think he's the classic one for that. I think everyone will be looking to take him on, talking about his jumping, is how keen he is, how much he idles, and you'll probably be able to get something like 2-1 on the day, and I think he'll bolt up.
It might have been, of course, disguised how good a ride he got last year, given his tendency to go left. If you watch that race back again, Ruby sticks to the inside the whole way, and then is fortunate enough something rolls off on the final bend and he's through that gap far quicker than Yarmouth was. But I think it was probably an underestimated good ride at the time.
Yes, and as you say, he just had a little bit of luck at the crucial moment, and he will need that again, because he's not the sort of horse you can take up the running a long way out because he idles so badly. So it is a tricky ride, but obviously Ruby's the top man on it, and I just think he is a lot better than these.
Okay, so JLT and between Top Notch maybe and York Hill. Moving on to the Ryanair, which has got us almost the mirror race, but for the non-novices. Underso looks certain to line up here. Ireland has a massively strong hand in this race, with a couple of exceptions, I suppose. Justice Hill and Uxizandre, we'll come to Justice Hill in a moment, but Underso, Empire of Dirt, Sizing John, they're all in there with Sub-Lieutenant. Vroom Vroom Maga holds so many entries, but Outlander as well will probably go Gold Cup.
Yeah, and I think Sizing John will go for the Gold Cup as well. I love Underso. Some of you have been following me in the past will know that, but I think he's got to be taken on here. My theory about Underso is he's very ground dependent, and he was one of those soft ground horses that went once on fast ground in the Arkle. And you saw him, God's Own is a really good horse, was upside him at the last, he sprinted away. And ever since then, he's looked to be feeling it when he's run on good ground. And the problem is that I don't think he'll get home on soft ground. I don't buy the fact that because he got home at 2 mile 5 in France, they go crawl sprint there a lot of the time. If you look at 1,000 Stars, he used to win the French champion hurdle and extended 3 mile 1, didn't get home on good ground to stay as hurdle. Allery, who was bought as a Gold Cup horse, having run over 3.5 in France, looks like he might be dropping back into this because he doesn't get home. So I think he's between the devil and the deep blue sea, because on good ground he might struggle to let himself down, on soft ground he won't get home. And Uxizandre, who was fantastic when running the legs off Don Cossack and Co a couple of years ago, it's one thing being ridden cautiously round the back in the Clarence House, very different from what he's got to do here. So I think this is the year that the Jigginstown team are finally going to win their own race. I'm not sure which one of the two it is. If you look at the market, you'd say it would definitely be Empire of Dirt. All the money's been for him. You've got to imagine that Brian Cooper's going to ride him. On a line through Sizing John, there's nothing much between the two of them, as Empire of Dirt's 10, so Sub-Lieutenant's a second season horse on the up. So if you were talking purely from value, I'd be going with Sub-Lieutenant at the moment. With the vibes, you'd be going with Empire of Dirt, and probably what I'd be doing is waiting to see which one Brian rides, and I'll probably be backing that.
Okay. Yeah, I've always been puzzled by Underso. I always thought he was a bare 2 miler, and just when Ruby sat on him when he got beaten in the Champion Chase last year, and Ruby was still sitting when Sprinter Sacra came to him, and then he sort of laboured up the hill. I've always been puzzled by his trip and where exactly he is these days.
Yeah, and there are lots of opinions. Tom Searle says he thinks he should be in the King George because he's turned into a stayer, and it could be lots of different things. Ruby, as we know, can be looks like he's holding on to more than he is sometimes. But my take on it was that he was not letting himself, because he was going so well, and then suddenly they tried to accelerate, and it almost looked like he was feeling it a bit. Okay. And the soft ground, if it were to come up soft, then you could make a case for backing him non-runner no bet in the Champion Chase, just on the basis in case anything happened to do that in the run-up. Okay,
I'm slightly more positive about Uxizandre than you are, but expecting the headgear back on and that early mistake he made as well, slightly put him out of mixed round. But obviously it's second run back. Joss's Hill, I'm amazed he's in this sort of race. I think it wasn't he jumped like a snooker table. He was such a gorgeous horse. He is still obviously a gorgeous horse, but you know what I mean? It's one of those classic assumptions where we always assume that because something's really big, it's going to be fantastic over fences. And yet, when he was wrong, he was absolutely clueless, and he's done well to do as well.
Yeah, it's a valid point. Obviously he was when he was over hurdles. Obviously he ran a blinder. Did he finish second or third in Supreme?
Second, I think it was.
And obviously it was one of those sayings. Whatever he did over hurdles was only going to be a bonus. Obviously, as a novice, he was a bit frightening at times, really, wasn't he? His jumping did leave a lot to be desired. But when it was good, and he's one of those horses. He's suited by a smaller field, which does help. It just gives his jumping a bit of time. And obviously, he won well around here when he won the Peterborough. Obviously, the step up to Grade 1 in the King George was too much for him. The trip was probably a bit too far from 2, hence why he's gone back to 2.5. He's just one of those horses. He's entitled to line up. I don't think he'd be good enough to win. But I think it's one of those races. He's definitely going to go to the Irish, that's for sure. I'm a massive fan of Sizing John. I think he's a lovely horse. He won a Grade 1 the last day in the Irish Gold Cup. he'll be coming back in trip, but I think they'll make plenty of use of him, and he does like a cut in the ground. But I think he's a big player at 6-1, and Jessie Harrington, she always pops up with 1 or 2 good horses at the festival.
Do you think he's going to run in this?
I suppose the Gold Cup is the other option, is it?
Yeah. I have a feeling they might just lean towards it, because I think, like I said, it is not that it's wide open, but there is a few cracks in a few of the horses. Like I said, under, so he's entitled to be head of the market, but whether he stays proper 2.5 grade 1 speed, again, a good point about the French form. Like in France, you do tend to go very steady early, and whoever quickens over the last 2 wins, if you know what I mean, who quickens the most. It's a different story in England. Well, in Britain and Ireland, you go a lot more of a constant gallop. You go quicker early, and best horse always wins. Whereas in France, sometimes the form can work out a bit differently.
And just to confirm, Joss's Hill was second, of course, to Tour actually in Supreme.
Tour.
So clearly has the ability to handle Cheltenham. It's just a question of that jumping. And so, a horse to get, Tom, or one that you feel is a solid favourite?
No, I think you want to take it on.
You're taking on them all. I'm impressed by your generally negative approach to favourites during the course.
It's not me in the trading department. I think Undersow is a horse that you could look to take on, and it looks a very competitive race this year. I think if Sizing John were to turn up in this race, he should be favourite. So on that basis, if you get non-run and no bet around 5-1, he looks a cracking bet.
Well, let's face it, this race revolved around the non-run and no bet scenario last year with Tour, of course.
Yeah.
Famously changed, so there is an element of that. If you do fancy horses that might not go for their first engagement, obviously non-run and no bet, you will tend to get a better price.
And interestingly, of the Jigginstown, Sub-Lieutenant, we've seen money for Sub-Lieutenant, 11-1. So clearly they're second in string, but very decent form, seems to be fancied. One horse that is a huge price, 33-1, whatever you like, and maybe he goes for the Grand Annual and he keeps getting crabbed for his attitude, but I think that's slightly unfair. Jerry, does Valateur go for this race?
I think the plan is to go for the Grand Annual. Don't quote me on it, but I think that's the plan.
Well, we'll come back to him for the Grand Annual then. But I just think, if the horse turned up on a good ground, in a good ground Ryanair, I think he'd have a cracking chance on some of his. He was unseated behind Duvan in the Arkle. He was third in the Supreme. But if he's going for the Grand Annual, we'll back him in that.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, because he is the sort of horse, actually, isn't he, that would run well in a better quality race. It is just that slight ability to win, maybe, although he did manage it the other day. Right, so that's the Ryanair, which again, unfortunately for me, getting a personal preference, I've got a lieutenant or a lieutenant. It's astonishing. We get more letters about that than anything else. Look, it's either American or it's English, and we take a punt, and but gee, I was really pleased when First Lieutenant retired. And now I've got another one. So, anyway, right, the Ryanair shares centre stage with the Stayers Hurdle, now reunited as the Stayers Hurdle rather than the World Hurdle, which for those of us with great tradition are very happy about. And you know what I mean, Harry, is now a short price. He's taken on virtually everything in this division, bar the Irish. Big field lined up against him in Cheltenham Trials Day. He's dispatched them. Since he's moved to Harry Fry, he's completely unbeaten. Will he extend that sequence this time around?
I think he probably will. There are 2 types of winners of this, aren't there? There are very different types of winners, and you only seem to get 2 types. One is the horse, like him, mops up the 3-mile graded hurdles, and the winners are 18 from 22 in those races this century during the season. And so I can't see how Cole Harden or Ballyoptic or any of those are going to turn around the form. He looks to be winning with plenty in hand. So what I've been doing all winter is looking for the other type of winner. The Bacchanal, the English Dreamer, the more of that, the Solwit, stepping up for the first time from 2 mile 5. But none of them look like they're going to run. They're good non-run and no bet prices. Yanworth's 8-1, he'll be about 3-1. If he runs the new ones 14-1, he'd have a chance. Nichols Canyon I count because I don't know what to make of that 3-mile run in the States. It's 10-1. If he were to, the vibes would get better for him and he were to run, I think he'd have a good chance. But it looks like none of them are going to line up against him. And this is a race, we mentioned in the guide, where it looks like you're taking a short price about these horses, but they keep winning. And actually, there's a case for saying he might be 6-4, 7-4 in the morning of the race when he should be 4-6, 4-7. So unless one of these fast horses turns up, and clearly look at the 6 day confirms on Friday, could be the sweet spot. I think he's going to win. I think he'll win easily.
Any hope for Snow Falcon, who still was travelling okay when coming down at Newbury, but far enough out to be uncertain and has been beaten in Ireland subsequently?
And that's, I think, the last point is the crucial one. You can tie the form in with the other ones, and he hasn't really ever quite delivered what he promised. But you can play each way. A price for the likes of him. I think the one other thing to think about is the ground. If it were to get very soft, I could give Agrippa a little bit of a squeak. He's about 50 to 1. Who really does like swimming and was pretty good considering the ground was quite decent at the Rendlesham last time.
Yeah, never really got into a rhythm either. He was always forced a little bit outside his comfort zone.
Didn't he look like his track really, didn't he?
No, he made a couple of early mistakes, and I don't think it just really went that well, the whole thing really.
No, and if it's one of those areas, as we know with Cheltenham, it only needs to rain overnight and it can get very soft. So that's the sort of horse I've got on my weather watch list if it looks like it's going to rain Wednesday night. But I wouldn't give him any sort of chance on decent ground.
And Carl Harden's resurgence the other day? Better, connections will say better ground, and given you got wind issues that away from the deep winter ground.
He has got an awful lot to find though, hasn't he? He was getting £8 there. You know what I mean? Harry appears to be beating them fairly easily. And Barry Geraghty was saying that he's keeping a fair bit up his sleeve. And I think he's been maligned because he was an Albert Bartlett horse. And traditionally the Albert Bartlett horse will come onto this as sloggers. They're 0 from about 15. There's 5 of the winners have come on, they've all been beaten. And because they haven't been quick enough. But he looks to be a different class of Albert Bartlett horse, and he's been incredibly progressive, hasn't he? I think he's one of the bankers of the week. Certainly at the price, I'd much rather be backing him than some of the other short-priced horses.
Okay. I'm looking down. Nicky hasn't got an entry at all, I think. Is that right?
I'd imagine so. Yeah.
I don't think so. Anything races you've ridden in, or horses obviously you know quite well that appeal?
You know what I mean, Harry. I think he's done extremely well since joining the Harry Fry team. The one thing I do like about the horse is he goes up in grade every time, but he never looks impressive. He always makes hard work of it, and he only wins by what he needs to. He's never really won by 20, 25 lengths. He always does what he has to and gets the job done. One horse who I do think is totally forgotten about is Jeski. I think if he does go for the race, he's ran over 3 miles once and he's won, and that was around Punchestown. Obviously, he's had 2 runs back since having a year off with an injury. He was very impressive first time out at Navan. He really battled and he won well. The last day he got beaten, he was short price, but it was 2 miles around Gowran, which is a very sharp track. It was one of those, I think if he'd won that day, he might have lined up in the champion hurdle. But obviously he got beaten. He probably bumped into a nice horse too, to be fair. But I think over 3 miles, he's been there, he's done that, he's won a champion hurdle. I think he's entitled to be a bit shorter than what the prices are giving. He's a multiple grade 1 winner, and he'll take. I think he could run a very big race.
Okay, so that's a Jeski up against. Again, what's your view on the favourite, Tom? Can we have another one to the take on camp, or are you slightly more concerned?
I think he's a really underrated 6 to 5 shot. He definitely deserves a favourite. Definitely the most likely winner, and I'd be less keen to take him on almost because there is a little bit of meat in that price compared to some of the 1 to 3, 1 to 4 shots that we were talking about earlier. The horse for money with us recently has been Shane's Hill, second at the last 3 festivals. I mean, you can't see that really being out of the places. But you know what I mean, Harry. It's going to be very, very difficult to turn over. I agree about Jeski. I mean, he's sort of 7 to 1, 8 to 1 at the moment. If he definitely goes for this race on quicker ground, you can definitely make a case for him. I'd be very surprised if he's out of the 3. But the horse for money is Shane's Hill into 13 to 2.
Okay, but Shane's Hill support there as well. Everyone hates hearing somebody else's hard luck punter story. We're going to hear mine with, Harry. I'm a big fan of stable changes, when stables go from small. And obviously Helen Nelms to Harry Fry. No disrespect, Helen is quite a major stable change. The first start for Harry was scheduled to be a 7-runner hurdle at Foss Lass, a handicap. 7 to 2 overnight, filled my boots, abandoned in the morning. So 7 to 2 bolts up at Cheltenham in a 17-runner boys race, I think it was. Next time out, you can't back it then, can you? You had 7 to 2 in a 7-runner Foss Lass race. So it'll always be the one that got away every time it comes up the hill. In the back of your mind is always that day. Anyway, but I think he's a really nice horse, obviously, Harry. And again, if you're looking for nice horses to win, in terms of profiles, then hopefully he will win the stayers. Let's have a quick chat about the other races that are on the Thursday, and I get so confused here. I found it pretty quickly. The Bettrends, we've mentioned the JLT, the Rhino Sunbelt. So the Brown Advisory, the Mayor's Novices Hurdle, obviously in its second renewal, and the Fulk Warwin Kim Muir. That's a motley bunch. So who's got the mic? Unlucky Tom, you're first.
The Pertemps. I like a horse of JP's Behind Time, 18-1. I thought when he won at Cheltenham Open meeting, just screamed out festival winner in the future. He's been beaten a couple of times since, but I think he has been lined up for this race, and 18-1 can only get shorter. The Brown Advisory, Blake Diamond King, festival winner, very, very strong at 11-2. We've seen some money for sizing Cadelco in that race. Bouveroy's slightly weak now, despite a great second to Ballyalton last year. And the training guys are very wary of Shantou Village if he runs in that race. So we're keeping an eye out for him. They're also keen to avoid Champers on Ice, who I mentioned before, has been back in the earlier race on the Tuesday. If he ends up going for the Kim Muir, I think if he goes for the Kim Muir, he's got a great chance. And Let's Dance, Mullins, has shortened up dramatically in the Mayor's Novice. I think that is where she's going. Is now 64 from threes.
Okay, and looking actually through, you've probably been exactly doing I do. What Nicky will have, because actually he's quite quiet, isn't he? Actually on those days, there's not a great deal in them.
Yeah, I don't actually think we even have an entry in the Pertemps.
No, you don't. I don't think. And the Brown Advisory, it's only Lammy Surge that's towards the top.
Tianval, I think he'll go for that race. He's
Sorry,
about a 20-1 shot.
Oh, okay. Wonder how far down you are there, whether you get in or not.
He's one of those horses now. He's in the Grand Annual as well.
Okay.
He'll run in either race. He's actually novice, but he's just £2 too high to get into the novices. So he's been forced, our hand has been forced a bit to run him in a straight handicap. But he has a bit of French experience, there's no problem.
Sorry, which horse was this?
Tianval.
Okay, fine. Oh yes, all right. I've got him. Yes, you might struggle to get. Yes, you're quite a long way down the weight, so you might struggle to get in there.
Yeah, definitely.
If he's off 142, he ought to get in. If he's £2 above that, that'll be
Okay,
all right.
he's still. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot come out in that race.
Okay.
It's a bit like the Ultima.
Yeah, true.
Poon Bobby?
He's another one. Yeah.
He was the 140 horse, wasn't he?
Yeah, he's just £2. I think he's actually £3 too high. I think.
Is he?
Yeah, but he's one of those. He'd better off staying in novice company. He might actually bypass Cheltenham because he's very lightly raced. But he's a horse we really do like, and he's one to look out for. In the Mayor's Novice Hurdle, a mare that I ride myself called Verdana Blue. She's won her last two in England now, and she's a mare that we really kind of rate highly. She won at Taunton last week, and the handicapper gave her a mark of 136.
Okay.
So she's entitled to line up, and back to 2 mile won't suit her, or will suit her, sorry. Stiff track, and I think she's a great price at kind of 16-20-1.
Yeah, I've called her for at least twice actually. Early capsize on debut.
Acceleration seated at the first, and she's won twice since.
Yeah, so she has been quite impressive.
Yeah.
Just actually looking for the entries there to make sure I get the name of the Mayor's Hurdle. That's right, because there is a fantastic story, isn't it? It's Ellie Beach, isn't it? Ellie Beach?
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Ellie Beach story is that she was put out as a 3-year-old, I think, wasn't it? She was put in a field with a gelding as a 3-year-old, except he wasn't a gelding. And a rather midnight tryst took place, and so she's had a foal. She's actually had a foal before she began her racing career, so it is absolutely astonishing that she's been able to be so successful. It's sort of the elephant in the room, isn't it? It gets mentioned in some guides, but it was a sort of, sort of thing that really shouldn't happen, but it has. And again, she has a leading chance, and she would be a fantastic story, actually.
It's a wonderful story, and having made her my banker of the week, I was absolutely horrified to see what's happened with Let's Dance. And part of that, as some of you may have seen, the race that Let's Dance won at Leopardstown, there's a £50,000 bonus for the stable staff if they follow up. So it doesn't go to the owners, trainers, jockey, anything like that. The stable staff get the 50 grand if they win any race at Cheltenham. And so this is clearly a much weaker race than the Neptune that Let's Dance was going for. And so you can totally understand why they're doing it. But last year, everyone seemed to know that Limini was going to run and not Listen Dear and Miska, who seemed to have similar form. And it's a very weak race, and she bolted up. And I backed Early Beach to do exactly that. And I started thinking, it's not too bad, it's non-runner, no bet. But of course, she's probably going to run as well, and Ruby will be on Let's Dance because that's the one they want to win. So that could be a bit of a horror show.
Yes, it's a Ritchie horse as opposed to, again, Early Beach is a nice story because it's owned by the Supreme Horse Racing Club. So it would be it certainly would be one of the stories of the meeting. Actually, it's a bit under the radar a little bit at the moment. But.
And a form. She won the Royal Bond. She thumped Saturnus, who went on to win the Grade 1 Future Champions. Penhill's won a Grade 2 over further, so the form's worked out really well, and I thought she was a virtual certainty for this, but that's the sort of curveballs you get with anti-post betting, I'm afraid. The other one I'm interested in the Kim Muir is Squatter, who some of you may remember last year was backed off the boards for the Martin Pipe. That was partly because of what had happened before, Ivanovic, Gorbatov, Don Cossack and on the fringe. But he went off 9-4 for a race that Gordon Elliott very keen to win. If you watch his races this year, I think it's fair to say he's been laid out for a handicap. He's got 135, which is perfect for this. Won't get in the novice handicap chase on that, but he will get in here. Gordon's got a fantastic record. He's run one in each of the last 4 years, and they finished 1, 2, 2, 3. Some of them look to have stamina doubts like he does, and they all seem to get home. And you've got a great chance of getting Jamie Codd. We mentioned earlier in the context of the 4 miler, if you get Derek or Jamie, it's a huge plus. So he's 16-1 non-runner no bet last time I looked, which was this morning. I think he could well be a real springer if that is the target, and Jamie runs.
Okay, that's interesting. On the Elliott thing, you like stats, someone posted me a good stat you can check out about horses in headgear from the Elliott Yard at the festival. 1 from 30 odd without and 7 from something with.
Yes.
Yeah, I have no idea.
I'm not surprised, but I will have a look at that.
Yeah, I have no idea whether
there are plenty of them do turn up.
Yeah, so again, just obviously in theory it should be a positive if they turn up in headgear. Okay, let's go on.
Sorry, just before you go on that, Gordon Elliott. There's an article in the book that Gary O'Brien from ATR has written about the Gordon Elliott Yard, and in particular about the handicaps. I think although people are waking up to Gordon Elliott, I still think the British just don't know how good he is at laying things out for handicaps. I think he won the first 7 or 8 of the big handicap chases in Ireland this year that were rated €100,000 or more. He's brilliant at laying them out. He'll have an absolute stack for them this week, and make sure when you're going through the handicaps you pay particular attention to his horses, because I still think they're being underbet.
I'm going to start, Jerry, with you for the Triumph, because just ask first of all, well-being about Charlie Parkes, really, off the back of that fall at Kempton, and what was the sort of fallout within the yard. Obviously, even when he departed, he wasn't going as supremely well as he had been before, and he was left at the mercy of the horse that he thrashed the time before.
Yeah, it's divided opinion really amongst the yard and amongst the public. I think obviously it wasn't an ideal preparation. Plenty of people were of the opinion that he was beat and he was under pressure, but I was a bit more in the other camp. You have to remember too, that was only his 3rd run in public. You know, he's not one of these horses that's come from France after having 5 or 6 runs, a few in these QPS bumpers and things like that. He's very inexperienced, and he's not the biggest juvenile. He was just behind the bridle the whole way. You could see down the back bar, he was just niggling him. He gave him a few reminders turning for home, but to be fair to the horse, he did respond straight away. He did need a good jump at the second last, which was the plan obviously, and didn't come off. But I wouldn't have written him off, that's for sure. Not saying he would have beaten Master Blue Eyes, but I definitely think it'd have been a closer than a lot of people kind of first thought. Obviously JP has the favourite too, with Deafy, the Sul, entitled to be favourite. Jumping just leaves a bit to be desired in my opinion, and could just get found out. You know, a strong. That's one thing with the Triumph too. Even though they're 4-year-olds, it's run at a real strong gallop. You know, there's no hiding place. You have to be on the ball. I would just give a bit of a squeak to Divin Bear if he does decide to go for the Triumph, because as you mentioned earlier, his form has been franked with Master Blue Eyes. He's an improving horse, and he could just be suited to a very strong gallop, which is the case in the Triumph.
Do you know if Charlie Parkes, this would still be the target based on that?
Yeah, it is, to be fair. He came out of the race, he was 100%, and he's schooled a few times since, which is important, and he's been good. They've been very happy with him. So the plan, as far as I know, is to run in the Triumph. Okay,
and again, Nicky's always been very positive, hasn't he, about this is the race he did actually want to run Charlie Parkes in. A lot of talk about Binocular going to the Supreme as a 4-year-old, and he's always made the point, and Philip to some extent agrees, that the ground is quite significant for the. He preferred Charlie Parkes with better ground, but Deafy just saw his best form has been with cut.
Exactly, yeah, like Deafy, even though he didn't jump great at Chepstow, he was soft enough that day when Dickie won at him. Like that's one thing about Nicky, he'd never overface a horse, and he wouldn't be that keen on sending a juvenile and running him against experienced horses in the Supreme, and the Triumph was always the kind of the target. And even after his fall the last day, it's not ideal, but you know he'll probably definitely line up.
Tom, this race, sort of the complexion of it has changed since the Fred Winter came into existence, in the sense that a lot of the sort of your chances of getting an Ickdam type result in the mud at 66 to 1, they don't run in that anymore. They tend to go for the Fred Winter. Is it a race now that you steer a little bit more carefully with?
Yeah, and I think this year in particular, it's very ground dependent as well. I mean, there's certainly doubts about which race a number of these are going to take up when we talk about Duffy Dessau and Charlie Parks. And we've pushed out, as have a number of other bookmakers have slightly pushed Duffy Dessau out. You can get 9 to 4 now, which actually considerably bigger than it has been. Master Blue Eyes was, on the face of it, incredibly impressive. One horse a little bit further down to mention is what is supposedly, I think, the Mullins second string, Mary DeVie. There's been a bit of money for that at 12s. It's not a race I would bet in at the moment. I need to have a clear idea what the ground is and what's going to turn up.
Yeah, and Bapome is I think the first Mullins string according to the betting. Again, this race was mentioned. I'm sure your stats were sort of based on pre and post Fred Winter.
Absolutely, yeah. We even call it the old Triumph and the new Triumph in the book. It's a totally different race. Just picking up on the Mullins thing there, part of the reason for that money is Willie in his press day on Monday said that Ruby wanted to ride Mary DeVie in the spring, and he made him ride Bapome. He said Mary DeVie hadn't trained hard enough after a maiden win, and he thinks he might have to train her more like a gelding going forward. He thinks he's going to throw the kitchen sink at her in the run-up to the Triumph, and he thinks that Ruby will have a very tough decision. I got the vibe that he might well ride Mary DeVie, so I'm not surprised there's been some money for her. The spring has been the strongest trial for this. In typical Irish fashion, they put all their good horses in the Grade 1 novice races, where we don't tend to do that quite so much over here. Perhaps it's the prize money. The form often gets turned round on the better ground. Ivanovic, Gorbatov, Tiger Roll, to a lesser extent Countrywide Flame. So you could give Mary DeVie a chance, even though she was well beaten in that. I'd be against Duffy Dessau. I'm just intrinsically against these horses that run in the finale in the mud. And yeah, I think My Silver's the last one to follow up. They look great in those sorts of races, but if we get good ground, Jerry's talked about his jumping. I'd be slightly concerned about him. The vibes about Charlie Parks, I think, are going to be crucial in the run-up. I saw that interview a few weeks ago that Nicky did, and someone asked him, is Charlie Parks a Triumph horse? This was before they're honest. And he just went, yes. And his whole body language could not have been more positive. He's obviously won it 6 times. He knows what it takes to win it. I just got the vibe that he thought not only was he a Triumph horse, he was better than some of his Triumph horses that have won. And clearly he's had an interrupted preparation, but he's a big price now. He's a double-figure price, and you can get him with a run because he might defect to something else. I'd be following the vibes, and I think if they're good, he'll probably be what I'll be backing nearer the time. Okay,
let's move on straight to the Albert Bartlett then. Actually looks as if we might have a fairly strong division in this regard, I think. It's one of the better renewals on paper. Death Duty obviously dominates the market, but Holstone and West Approach have both shown decent levels of form, I think, in this country.
Yeah, I think it's a good race. I think it's becoming an increasingly good race. It's one of the only conditions races that's oversubscribed, isn't it? Horses getting balloted out. So you get a full 20 runners, they go quickly, and it is a slog. Just as a quick aside, it's not actually doing horses a lot of harm. A lot of people thought they'd be bottoming, but 5 horses from this have gone on to win the RSA the next year. Last season, I've seen it for this season, but last season 5 of the horses won novice Grade 1s over fences. So I wouldn't worry too much about it being too much of a slog for a long term, but yeah, Death Duty's a fantastic looking horse. I really like him. He jumps so well, but he's never run beyond 2 mile 4. Even his point was over 2 mile 4. You've got to be worried that he'll get outslogged by one of these second season horses that do so well, a real battle hardened tough stayer. Holstone's the obvious one, I think. I prefer him to West Approach. He's beaten him all 3 times they've lined up against each other, and I'm always very cynical about these novices who go into open company, don't look like winning and record really high figures. He's 1 from 11, and I think he's exactly the sort West Approach will run well without winning again. Holstone's the obvious one. The one I've backed is the World's End, who won the Prestige last time, which was the race Brindisi Breeze ran. I think some of that northern form in the graded races, particularly in unfashionable divisions like this, tends to get a bit underrated. I don't particularly believe in collateral lines of form, but for what it's worth, no Hasselhoff, who chased home Holstone and West Approach, and then Constantine Bay in previous races. And the World's End beat him much more easily. He travelled well, jumped well, and he was really strong at the end of the race. You can't overemphasise about how much of a stamina test this is. The rest of his form with Full Irish and Testify has worked out well. He's about 14 to 1, I think, and he'd be one of the best bets of the week for me.
Okay, interesting horse. And yeah, it's interesting about the stamina for Death Duty. He's in the Neptune as well. Are they committed to going?
Yes, I mean, Gordon Elliott's almost said even if the ground came up really soft, we're still going to run him as. And he might be a superstar, but this is a real slog.
Okay, so that's potentially Death Duty to be out. So, Constantine Bay, would that be?
Yeah, I think he's a bit of a forgotten horse in the race.
He is a little bit.
And definitely if the ground comes up on the slow side. I won a grade 2 in him the last year on Doncaster, and I can remember the boss, he actually sent me up early in the morning just to check the ground because it was good to soft, and he was kind of worrying whether to run him or not because his 2 previous runs were on soft ground. He hadn't beaten much prior to Doncaster, but thankfully he ran that day and he won. Obviously we beat the horse of Skelton's, No Hasselhoff, who's disappointed since, but he did run very quickly after his run, and we pulled a long way clear of the third horse. It rode a good race. I think he's a 16 to 1 shot. He loved the trip, and he will really appreciate the stiffer test in stamina around Cheltenham, as in the track. Doncaster obviously is flat. Cheltenham will be a lot more kind of stamina sapping, and I think he'll love it. He's a horse that'll want probably further in the future. But he's definitely forgotten horse of the race. Saying that, Death Duty, I think, like we said earlier, like Matt said, I think he could be a future superstar. I just love his profile. He won his point to point. He won 2 bumpers, and he won with a penalty, which it's a very hard thing to do, and not many horses can do it, and he has, and he's unbeaten over hurdles. Obviously, I suppose you'd like to see him have run over the strip prior to going to Cheltenham, but like I said, Gordon Elliott's brilliant at what he does, and he wouldn't be overfacing him over the trip if he didn't think he'd stay it. I don't think he'd be any shorter price on the day, but I think 5-2 is probably a great price about him because I think his future is definitely ahead of him, and I think he could easily win the Albert Bartlett.
We're going to have a range of horses here, actually. Tom, are you going to throw anyone else into the mix? Because I've still got 1 to go, and yeah, it's a good renewal this year.
Well, I love the World's End. I was really impressed with how he won the other day. Back to him, I think he's got a great chance, and I definitely agree. I think 14, 12 to 1. He's overpriced. Death Duty. I mean, the rumours coming out of Ireland suggest he is, the next coming, and probably deserves to be as strong as he is at the top of the market. So 9 to 4, and we've seen bits of money for. Bacardi's, Augusta Cape, Monolith, a lot of Irish horses there's interest in. The best backed horse with us is West Approach, 11 to 2. And I don't understand why it's so short. I think at that price you have to take West Approach on. I mean, I know it's a year on, but he was 11th in this race last year. I can't understand why Holstone's a bigger price. Our traders are definitely happy to take on West Approach at 11 to 2, and I think you'd be worried about Death Duty being as good as everyone seems to think he is.
Okay, I'm much more in the West Approach fan club, I have to admit, having done the tapes from that race. I think on board he might have run through beaten horses, but it's worth remembering that Ruby Walsh rode Thistlecrack in quite similar style, coming from further back when he first won, and it is that late developing family, and he did make quite a lot of ground. So I wouldn't be personally quite so dismissive of him. And Will He Be Caught's the other one, probably deserves a mention, just simply because his form has worked out pretty solidly, actually, and typical in a normal year he would be shorter, I think, than he is here.
Definitely, and you've got horses like Willoughby Court, Constantine Bay, Monolith as well from Ireland, who stepped up last time at 3 miles, who are all bringing good credentials to this. It's a cracking race, and you've got a good chance of backing a winner at a decent price in this. And that's why I totally go on. West Approach, I'd be wanting to lay all day. Yeah, I think is he 1 from 11 now?
Yeah, it's certainly initial. His initial stride rate's not good. It's just the move he made from the back. Considering the pace didn't collapse with Cole Harden, and you know what I mean, Harry, and he was right out the back by 5 lengths. He did make a considerable, move from what was an unpromising position. If all the rest of them had come forward with him, and he ended up ahead of, as you say, the danger with that is he can clearly be overrated on the fact that he didn't win and his strike rate is low. But given that the family, maybe it's just hoping the Thistlecrack connections. Yes, it would be nice to see them in the winners' enclosure after which of course leads us on to the big race of the week, the Gold Cup. Sadly, minus Thistlecrack, which I think of all the non-runners, personally at least, is the biggest absence, because it would have given Colin Tizard just about the complete hand. I think you had a classy horse who might have just lacked a bit of experience. Is Q Card too old? Is Native River coming from the sort of brain power background of, a different complexion of tempo, winning big handicap chases. What's your views?
I totally agree. I'm gutted about this. I've not had a penny on him, but the way Connections campaigned him, no Connections did that. This was particularly unfair. So my racing fans, and I hope Colin Tizard wins it. I think it's been a breath of fresh air. One of the stats, the Gold Cup, 15 of the 16 winners this century have come from the first 3 in the market. It's a very predictable race, class shows, which I'm now about to tell you why I don't think any of the 3 are actually going to win. I think Q Card is the one of the 3 I like most. Yeah, he is too old, but as Colin said, if he was 9, he'd be about even money for this probably. Jack Adam, and my real theory about this is that Gold Cup's a brutal race and it leaves scar tissue, and horses like Jack Adam, and he's a top class horse, on the bridle at home, on the gallops, still looks fantastic. Winning the lesser grade ones looks fantastic. When you have to go through the pain barrier again, that scar tissue does show. And Ruby said he got very empty in the race here, and he would have been beaten a long way had Q Card stood up last year because Don Cossack was idling. I know he's had a clearer run in this year, but I can't see him. Native River is a lovable horse, but he's won 2 handicaps 155, as you allude to. He's beaten very exposed horses just about. The Denman would have told us something, but Bristol Demai got injured. So I think the pendulum has swung too much in the Gold Cup towards stamina being associated. You've only got to go back a few years. Best Mate, Kicking King, War of Attrition, Corto Star, these 2 milers stepping up. And everyone was saying, oh, the old sloggers of the 90s don't win this anymore. You need a lot of class in the Gold Cup. We've now had some Gold Cups that have been very strongly run, which you don't always get with Denman, Coley horses like that. It's rained 4 times in the last 9 years. We've had soft ground, and everyone's just talking about stamina. And I think I'm just not sure Native River's quick enough. So you've got to find a winner somewhere. I think it could be a year for an upset, but the horse I backed is Outlander, who won the second best trial. Clearly Thistlecrack isn't going to run. The Lexus, and he won going away from Jack Adam and Valsalido. That was only his second run beyond 2 mile 5. The other run was at the dag end of last year when he might have been over the top of Punchestown when he was beaten by Zabana. And the way he ran, he looked as if he would be really well suited by the step up in trip. The O'Leary's been very positive about him. They've said they think he's a better horse than Empire of Dirt and Don Poley, and he's very much their number 1 for this, by the way. Empire of Dirt's in the Ryanair. And I think he's a big price for a horse who's won a key Grade 1 trial as a second season horse on the up, because he's got an unflashy profile.
I'm in your camp, actually. The query, I suppose, if I was taking Devil would be the trip, as you say. Do you feel, because obviously the sort of soft ground slog would suit Native River and probably not suit him. So are you sort of hoping there's no rain overnight, particularly Thursday?
Absolutely, yeah. I think if it were to come up soft like a Coneygree year, then he might well struggle to get home. But so often some of those horses I mentioned, the Gold Cup winner has never run beyond 3 miles, and we always have this debate. But more of them get home than you think when the ground is decent. So if it dries out, and it's hard, there are quite a few of these. I mean, I keep thinking about Champagne West, who I go oscillating from can't possibly jump well enough to even get round, to looking at, he's won the Thyestes off 154. That's a £9 higher mark than Jack Adam won it off when he was second, £12 higher than on his own when he was second. And the Irish marks is a very different system over there. I'm struggling to remember the last time a horse won a big Irish handicap off such a high mark, and he won it well. So if he did actually put in a sensible round of jumping, I suppose he might be one of the outsiders, but I think it's more likely that he'll be tailed off after.
And just to revisit your stat read, Jack Adam, because you say he could well have won a Gold Cup, so he's been involved in 2 finishes. I think it's still only Many Clouds that has won. Sorry, not Many Clouds.
The fellow.
Yes, the last horse to win.
Yeah, I mean, technically Seymour Businesses, because he got carried out, but if you don't count that, this century, 62 horses have run in the Gold Cup, having been beaten in it the first time they ran, and all 62 have been beaten. There are some other very negative stats as well. Horses 10 and over, all 65 have been beaten this century, including 4 favourites. And a lesser known one, that all 72 horses this century who've run on officially heavy ground that season have been beaten. And last year, Q Cod and Don Cossack were the only runners in the field who hadn't run on heavy ground that season. Bobsworth was the only one the year he won. And sometimes the slog, even though everyone thinks it's 3 or 4 months earlier, and then they'll have got over that, but a slog around 3 miles in these top races really can take its toll on horses, and I do like horses who are kept away from heavy ground. Q-Card did have that slog in the Betfair Chase,
Okay.
and a lot of people say it's a long time away, but I'd still be a little bit worried about that.
Yeah, that's quite interesting because the point about these sort of races is the Gold Cup's been very difficult to back up in when you've won or run well in the past. But the other thing, unlike the 2 milers, you're talking about the races being settled by a burst of speed that you get over quickly and you can produce that burst of speed 3 weeks later. It does appear these staying chases now leave a significant mark on a horse.
Yeah, like some of those stats are very interesting, and from a jockey's point of view, sometimes you wouldn't go into that much detail, but when you do hear them like that, you do kind of sit up and do take notice.
Does that sort of make sense? You know what I mean? Because there are stats and the stats, but when you're listening to that, does that sort of resonate with you in terms of things you've experienced of horses that you're thinking, well, maybe it did leave more of a mark? Or
yeah, exactly. I just think the heavy ground one is very interesting, because you used to remember too, in Ireland the ground does tend to be heavier, so the Irish horses probably end up having harder races. Like Jack Adam, when he did win the Tayestas, that was maybe barely even saw the race that day. There was that much rain and fog. It was hard work. One thing I'd say about him is that he has been trained for the race this year, where he probably hasn't been in the past. Saying that, I don't think he'll win. Like, if I had a choice of riding any of these, I'd be a Native River fan.
okay,
I know people think he wants a bit further, and he ran the 4 miler last year, but he still won over 2.5 on Aintree in April last year. If you can win over 2.5 around there, you're not that slow, if you know what I mean. I think he's a horse. He's a very nice profile, improving. Not the flashiest horse. Dickie Johnson gets on very well with him, and I just like the last day. I know Bristol May was found lame afterwards, but Aidan Coleman, he didn't force him. He just rode a nice waiting race, and they just really basically raced over the last 2 or 3 fences, and he quickened up nicely, because prior to that everyone thought, you have to go out and have to make the running, have to gun him from the front, have to push him from, a mile and a half out, but he didn't the other day and he still won. It's probably not a vintage year, I don't think, the Gold Cup this year, is it? Q-Card's been there. I think someone said a stat today about 11-year-olds winning Gold Cups. There's not many have done it.
no, not a massive amount have actually tried it. It was 1969, isn't it, the last one with What's a Myth that's actually won.
But 10-year-olds plus are 0 from 65 this century, including 4
Okay.
favourites, so plenty have gone off well thought of.
Right,
Yeah.
so that might.
Like I said, Q-Card, he's really a public horse, isn't he? I think everyone loves him. They'd love to see him win the Gold Cup. But like I said, if I had a choice of riding anything, it would definitely be Native River.
Okay, what's going to go off favourite, Tom? Because that has been a little bit of a yo-yo. Is the public money for Q-Card, the public adoration for Q-Card means you'll fight shy of putting him too big because you're likely to see support?
Well, we go 3-1 joint favourites, the 2 Tizard ones. We pushed Jack Adam out to 5-1 on Friday, and as such, I've seen a lot of money for him. Now into 4s. I guess depending on how the Mullins yard go during the week, I wouldn't be that surprised if that was challenging the other 2 for favouritism on the day. It comes up soft. I wouldn't be a backer of any of the 3 of them at that price. As much as it might not be a vintage Gold Cup, I think it's probably the most exciting Gold Cup we've had for a long time. I think Sizing John's got a great chance if he goes for that. I've had one small each way bet, and should have asked John Joe about him earlier. Over at the Irish Gold Cup. More of that came down at the last, going, I thought, every bit as well as Sizing John. He was 50-1. He's now into sort of 20-25, it's a lot shorter. I just get the impression, John Joe afterwards, he's saying I wouldn't have been better than 5th. Well, I think he would. I think John Joe thinks he's got him back almost to the horse that he thought he was. And I think 25-1 each way, a horse with the potential class of more of that, I think is a really interesting bet.
What about Manila Rocco in similar vein? He's obviously had jumping issues, but obviously he sprang to life for the 4 miler last time around, and stamina is his strong suit. Again, he might want it, Native River type scenario of wanting it really soft, or is his jumping not good enough?
I'd be worried about his jumping. I think more of that could be quicker. But it's an interesting price in a very, very open year, and I think something at a very decent price is going to get in the first 3. So I think at the price is more of that. Looks very interesting. I think Sizing John, I can see that running very, very well, and it would be fantastic to see Q-Card win. I just think potentially Q-Card and Native River at 3-1 are both slightly too short.
Don't have much audience participation so far, so let's have a show of hands for Q-Card. A straight match between Q-Card and Native River, I think, as we get. Who of those 2, Heart? Cue card? Show of hands. Pretty native river? No, marginally more native river. That's for the benefit of those watching on Facebook Live. It's about 65-35?
Yeah.
Okay, in favour of native river. So I think, again, the point's been made for both this and the champion hurdle. We may not actually have a massive standout scenario, but you can have a great race, can't you? It doesn't have to be a great renewal, but there's every chance to be a
It's
great
much
race.
more exciting than the champion chase from a betting point of view, isn't it?
Right, we'll have a quick rattle through the remaining races on Friday. Then you've got a £100 charity bet courtesy of Tom, which I think we're going to split £50 to Matt and £50 to Jerry. So we'll do that in a moment or two. And we'll just have 5 or 10 minutes to anyone who wants to ask anything from the floor. But as I say, I'm sure we're happy to hang around if you want to just come and ask us individually. The remaining races that we haven't spoken about are the County, the Fox Hunters, the Martin Pipe, and the Grand Annual.
Interesting in the Fox Hunters. I was very impressed with Ask the Weatherman when I saw him the other day. I'm trying to get to the bottom, and if anyone can tell me this, I'd be grateful, about Will Biddick's riding arrangements. Now, Paul Nicholls was saying he is obliged to ride for Jack Barber, and therefore that's why,
right, I believe.
Right, and that's what I've heard. And then I've heard other people saying Will Biddick said Ask the Weatherman's much better than Wonderful Charm, and that's why he wants to ride him. So
I'm told there is a connection through, yes, that he has to ride it for the Barbers, because that's because of the number of point-to-point winners that Barbers basically give to Will Biddick, yeah.
So he's definitely interesting for that in a renewal that doesn't look to have a lot of depth at the moment. The horse I really fancied for the Martin Pipe sadly doesn't look like getting in, which was Alboon Photo of Willie Mullins. His 3 winners of this have had 2, 3 and 4 runs each coming into this. He seems to be able to find a horse that's a real stayer. It's quite a test of stamina, the Martin Pipe generally. But he's down on 131, which about 135 is probably going to get a run. And it's not really Willie's style to run him under a penalty. So be keeping an eye out him for that. I was very interested in Jerry's body language about Vanateur when that was discussed. There was a big smile in the discussion of the Grand Annual. Obviously, Nicky, he's desperate to win that race as usual. He's got a couple of very talented types, him and Lammy Surge, who might be a bit high in the handicap, but they are the sort of horses a la Belvano who might suddenly pop up on the day.
Yeah, first with Lammy Surge, I suppose he was a bit disappointing at Fontwell the other day in the hurdle race, the games or whatever it was. But if you look at Lammy Surge, he's actually entered in everything at Cheltenham.
Yes, he does.
I'd say he's in everything bar the bumper only because he can't run it. He's in over hurdles, fences, everything. He's one of those horses. There's plenty of ability there because obviously he was running a big race again he ran the RSA last year with the JLT. When he jumped the second last in front and then hung violently left. He's obviously got that tendency, and he showed it again this year on Exeter when he hung badly left. But he's the kind of horse he will pop up someday. He might be a big price, he mightn't be fancy, but there is a big race in him somewhere along the line. Not saying it's going to be Cheltenham this year, but it could be,
Yeah, I mean, the thing with him, I called that Fontwell race and the National Spirit, and he needs something to take him into the race, doesn't he? And Camping Ground just disappeared off into the sunset, and you could see Darryl actually was travelling okay, but he needed something to tow him up because he's not the sort of horse that would chase a 20-length leader, is he? But he might get a completely different scenario in a fast run handicap at the festival.
Yeah, exactly, and at least he's going left-handed again, because if he does have any tendencies, it's always to go left, whether it's jumping or hanging. He just always has that. It's kind of his comfort blanket, So at least he's going the right way around. Back to Vanateur. He's like, the main reason I smile is because he's one of those horses. He's a bit like Brainpower. He works extremely well at home. If you were to ride him in a piece of work or anything like that, you'd let him line up in the Queen Mother. He's loads of speed, loads of gears, and his jumping has got better. Like I said, he's in a few of the graded races, but I have a feeling he might just go for the Grand Annual. He's a horse now. He worked on Tuesday around Kempton, worked extremely well. But like I said, it's not a surprise because he's one of those horses that always does work well. But he's one of those horses, he's good form around the course and he's entitled to line up with a massive chance. One I just mentioned for the Martin Pipe is a horse called Thomas Campbell. He's an interesting profile, he's a novice. He could just lack a bit of experience, but it won't be for lack of trying because he's a real genuine type. He's owned by the Kelvin Hugheses, and they're keen to go for that race with him as far as I know.
Okay, so that's another one to add into the mix. Tom, anything outside those that...
Well, Fox Hunters on the fringe has been very well supported, now 5-4 for the repeat. I was chatting to the training guys earlier. Apparently we've laid Ask the Weatherman at 14s, which they now note was the wrong price. Now 9 to 2 and desperate for results. In terms of the other races, personally, I think Vaniteur at 16 to 1 is one of the bets of the meeting in the Grand Annual, and former beating Arzal and Fox Norton very, very well in a novice chase last year. I think it's got a great chance. And we are keen to say on the right side of Le Président in the same race. But actually, Fox Hunters, if on the fringe or Ask the Weatherman wins, might not be a great day for.
Okay, and actually one more I should ask you about, Jerry, is Peace & Co. Off the back of that piece of work behind Brainpack. Because the encouraging thing was he did seem to settle a lot better, and he's in the county. I think that's his only handicap entry.
Yeah, he rode him last Saturday before racing. It was a good piece of work. Justice Hill led us, Brainpower sat second, and I sat last. And like I said, it was interesting. It's the first time I've sat in him for a while, and he really was a different horse. He really is switched off and a lot more amenable. He quickened up nicely. I think the plan is to go to Sandown with him first on Saturday, and then with the hope of running well, if not winning, and then going to Cheltenham later on.
There is the bonus that.
Exactly,
yes.
And like I said, it's reinstated this year, and I think it's a great initiative for owners, trainers, jockeys. You know, it is a big help, and it's not ideal to run a horse twice in a week, especially in competitive handicaps, but with that bonus, it's a massive initiative.
So if he was to not win the Imperial, is it Nicky's way of operating that he wouldn't run in the county? So basically what I'm saying is, do we all have a free non-run and no bet in the county?
Well,
getting at, really. You can skirt around the issue, but answer the question about
exactly, but I suppose if you look at the horse's profile, he is lightly enough raced, and I think that goes down to, like, he's not the easiest horse to train. That's been well publicised. So 2 races in a week might be a bit too much, but like you said, Nicky, he's not trying for no reason, you know.
Okay, so that could be a county hurdle bet, non-run and no bet. And personally, I've got one in the county that's probably my most interesting horse of the week, actually, which is a horse called Winter Escape of Alan King's and JP McManus's, who has only run once this season and was beaten favourite in the Greatwood, sent off 3 to 1, well backed, as if, you know, the right people were backing it. He ran poorly, really. He was well beaten, but they haven't seen him since, and it may well be that mark's just been kept. And he's 20 to 1, having been bigger, non-run and no bet. He clearly is a bit fragile, and you worry with the hurly-burly, but I'm pretty sure that if he lines up on the day and people actually go back and look at their lines of form, that he won't be a 20 to 1 chance. So again, there's a couple of horses you might just consider with a non-run and no bet sort of safeguard. But I think Winter Escape, when people actually look at his form, he was winner of the Dovecote, when again he looks a really nice young horse. It's just a question of whether or not he's got the nous for the festival, but I don't think he'll be a 20 to 1 chance in the county on the day.